Hey guys, tonight we tiptoe down a shadowy lane in ancient Kyoto, where the air smells of damp wood, faint miso, and someone else's incense. A paper lantern flickers on a crooked hook, its flame shivering like it knows something you don't. You duck beneath a low wooden awning, brushing aside a curtain stitched with plum blossoms, and you're immediately swallowed into the hush of a household where servant girls work quietly, endlessly half-visible ghosts trailing behind lacquered doors. It's the kind of place where slippers are lined up with obsessive care, and silence is both armor and expectation, somewhere inside. A girl, no older than 12, pours tea with such trembling precision that you forget she's been awake since before dawn. Her fingers are red from scrubbing bamboo floors, her hair tight and sore from the morning's braid. If she's lucky, she'll eat before sundown. If not, well, she knows better than to ask. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You press farther into the house, shuffling past silken screens and rooms so quiet they practically hum. It's the late Heian period, maybe early Kamakura. Either way, women here aren't free, they're folded neatly into roles like origami. You arrive just in time to witness the early life of someone born with no real name. Just a designation. Servant girl. Historians still argue whether these roles were always imposed from birth, or if poverty sometimes forced older daughters into servitude later. But you're watching the very beginning. The child's parents, desperate and tired, strike a deal with a noble household, a contract, some coin, maybe rice. The girl is 3. She doesn't understand why her kimono smells different, or why her mother won't meet her eyes. In the following years, she's trained not so much like a person, but more like a piece of living furniture. She learns how to be quiet, how to fold, how to never take up space. Her sleeping mat is in a corner near the kitchen, and her name is changed to something neutral. Little Belle, or Springleaf, something soft and forgettable, quirky. Detail for you. Some households gave their servants nicknames based on the time of year they arrived, like Chestnut Rain or Early Frost. It sounds poetic until you realize it also meant no one had to remember their real name when they were sold or traded during festival days. The family may hand her a bright ribbon or let her glimpse the parade through the garden gate. She's not allowed to join, of course, but they say the moonlight looks brighter through lacquered wood anyway. You try not to sigh when you see her bow politely to a guest who doesn't see her, who doesn't even pause when his muddy sandal brushes the edge of her robe. The girl isn't allowed to speak unless spoken to. She doesn't ask questions. She memorizes the rhythms of the household like a musician reading sheet music. When the lady of the house sighs a certain way, it means she's about to call for tea. When the manservant frowns at the doorframe, it means guests are late and tempers will be shorter than usual. And if you think that sounds like a lot for a kid, it is. You probably wouldn't survive this job past a weekend, not just because you'd complain about the lack of air conditioning. Imagine waking before the birds, walking barefoot on frost-covered stones, and being blamed for the dust on the altar, even though you cleaned it twice. But you're here now, and you keep moving. The girl grows. Her duties change. She now helps dress the lady of the house, combing long hair that smells like camellia oil, tying sashes so tightly her fingers go numb. There's a precise art to it. Left over right. Smooth the fold. Never tug. If she slips even once, if a fold sits awkwardly, or a pin goes crooked, she'll get scolded. Sometimes gently. Sometimes not. You notice something. The girl never looks anyone directly in the eyes, unless they're another servant. It's not shyness, it's survival. Eye contact means presumption. Presumption means punishment. So she watches the ground. A lot studies people's feet to guess their mood. One day she spots a sandal turned inward at the heel, a bad omen in this culture. She says nothing. That day, the lady of the house has a miscarriage. Coincidence? Maybe. But the servant girls whisper that someone should have said something. By now you're sensing the rhythm of this place. The soft footfalls, the clink of ceramic bowls, the constant thrum of a life lived in the background. The girl doesn't dream big. She dreams of warm water, of a comb that doesn't scratch, of a single evening where she can sit still and hear the frogs outside the window. And through it all, the house itself looms part shelter, part trap. Its sliding doors never quite shut all the way. Its paper walls leak sound like secrets. Even the shadows in the corners seem to know things. You don't just work in this house. You become part of its memory. Some scholars debate whether these girls were technically slaves. Legally they weren't. But when your contract is indefinite, your freedoms are minimal. And your name can be changed at whim. The distinction feels like a clever, legal shrug. So as the lanterns are dimmed, and the girl prepares to sleep on her reed mat near the fire basin, you lie beside her in the quiet. You watch as she tucks in her hands, listens for creaks, and breathes just loud enough to know she's still there. Tomorrow she'll rise again, before the rooster crows. So will you. You wake to the scrape of wooden ladles, and the soft clatter of chopsticks being counted. There's no rooster here, just the sound of one of the older servant girls coughing into her sleeve. Morning, in this household, begins before sunrise. Always. You stretch beneath your thin blanket. But already, a pair of cold hands tug at your sleeve. It's time to start today. You're retracing the steps of a girl who was never really given a choice. She was born into servitude, not because of anything she did, but because someone else made a decision in a dusty back room years ago. Contracts back then could bind girls as young as 5 or 6 into lifelong labor, all signed with a single brushstroke by a desperate father or uncle. You didn't need a full name. You didn't need to agree. You just needed to be quiet and small and economically inconvenient. Historians still argue whether these arrangements were always forced, or if some families believed they were securing a better future, placing a daughter in a noble household rather than letting her starve in a rural hut. But as you stare into the eyes of the girl folding sheets next to you, she doesn't seem very rescued. There's a myth people love to tell that Japanese households were harmonious, perfectly balanced ecosystems where everyone knew their place. And yes, that may have been true in a scroll painting. But down here in the tatami fiber trenches, hierarchy hits harder. You quickly learn where you sit in the pecking order. And if you're new or young, it's at the very bottom, just slightly above the family cat. And only because you can hold a broom. This girl's mother once served, too. In fact, her grandmother probably did as well. You begin to see the generational thread that snakes through this world. Daughter after daughter trained, not just in tasks but in temperament. It's not just about cleaning. It's about being agreeable, forgettable, and always useful. Today's chore: rinsing rice in a wooden tub, while trying not to splash water on the floor. She's not the only one doing it, but she's the only one small enough to reach into the cold water without bending over. Her fingers are red by the time the grains run clear. Her reward: the faintest nod from the cook, who still refuses to learn her name. It's hard to tell whether the adults in this house see the servants as human or furniture. They hand you orders, not greetings. They correct you before they thank you. Occasionally, a visiting noblewoman will smile and ask how old you are. If you answer 10, she'll laugh and call you precious. If you answer 12, she blinked because now you're nearly old enough to be considered an object of courtship, not cuteness. Here's a strange but real tidbit. Some households gave their servant girls tall, ghetto wooden clogs, not just to elevate their status visually, but because the clacking sound helped masters track their location in real time. Step too slow or too fast, and someone might come looking. Imagine being a teenager, and your shoes are a surveillance system. Still, there are brief, quiet moments in the routine that feel almost like peace. The sound of a bamboo ladle against clay, the sight of steam rising from the kettle, the hush of the house when the children are off at their lessons. For a few breaths, it's like the world pauses. Then the lady of the house rings the chime. It's not a bell. Exactly, more like a delicate ting, made from striking a carved glass pendant with a hairpin. That sound sends a ripple through the entire building. Every servant stiffens. You scramble into place, brush off your sleeves, make sure your obi isn't crooked. It's time to attend. You shadow the girl as she climbs the narrow wooden steps to the inner room. She's only allowed to enter with bare feet, and she kneels 3 times before sliding the paper door. Inside sits the mistress draped in layers of brocade, her hair arranged in a glossy coil that looks like it could slice butter. She holds a fan. You hold your breath. She doesn't look up as she speaks. Hot water. Tea. My eyes hurt. The girl bows so low her forehead nearly touches the mat. Then she backs away, never turning her back to the mistress. You can tell she's practiced this routine 1,000 times, but her hands still shake slightly. Not from fear exactly, more from the memory of mistakes. The kind that earns silence, or worse. A week of double duties. There's another unspoken rule here. You're only noticed when you mess up. No one says good job for catching the curtain before it falls, or for cleaning a mirror until it shines like a koi pond. But miss a smudge or forget a towel, and suddenly everyone sees you. So you watch the girl try to become invisible again, slipping back into the hallway like a shadow in cotton socks. Later that day, the younger girls gather. In the kitchen, it's not playtime. There's no such thing, but they're permitted to peel vegetables together as long as they don't talk above a whisper. One of them hums a lullaby, and another slices her thumb and doesn't cry. You realize that survival here isn't about strength. It's about silence, rhythm, and waiting for someone to leave the room so you can breathe again. Quieter still are the signs of change. You hear 2 older servants murmuring in a storage room. One says the lord of the house is spending too much at the gambling hall. The other says the price of rice is climbing again. The girl doesn't react, but you can feel her posture tighten. When a house falls, it's the servants who slipped first. That night, she's back on her mat, curled around a pillow stuffed with dried leaves. She stares at the ceiling, where spiderwebs have gone unnoticed by everyone but her. She doesn't mind them. At least spiders have a job. In the distance, a drumbeat echoes from a nearby shrine. You imagine she dreams of the festival, though she'll never walk in it. But maybe, just maybe, she'll get to sweep up the confetti the next day, and that, in its own way, would be a kind of victory. You're up again before dawn, your feet sore from yesterday, your arms already bracing for today. But it's not the work that exhausts you, it's the hierarchy. Inside the house, you don't just scrub and serve. You navigate. Every room has a mood. Every person above you on the invisible ladder is a test you must pass without showing that you're being tested. Today, you follow the girl through the tight, polished hallways of the estate as she tries desperately to avoid being noticed the wrong way. The rules are silent, but ironclad. When entering a room, bow once at the door, once just inside, and once again before you speak. When serving food, your left hand holds the dish, and your right hand never touches the rim. When folding laundry, make sure the creases align perfectly, not because anyone will thank you, but because someone will scold you if they don't. Historians still argue whether these rigid codes stemmed purely from Buddhist-influenced court etiquette, or whether they were more a product of elite paranoia, fear of embarrassment, fear of spies, fear of status, slipping by a single dropped bowl. Either way, you now live inside those rules. Your world is a diagram of roles. At the top sits the master, rarely seen, often heard. Beneath him, the mistress, who rules the domestic sphere like a silk-loved iron. Then come the senior servants, the cook, the steward, the nursemaid, each one a gatekeeper. Then come the junior girls, like the one you're following, trying to learn the ropes without tripping over them. One misstep, and you're not just corrected, you're humiliated. Quietly, publicly, completely. A crooked bow might earn you 3 extra hours of firewood chopping. An impatient tone might earn you a day without food. A sarcastic glance. Well, let's just say you'll be weeding the garden until your fingers cramped up today. The girl's in trouble. Not for anything she did, but because someone else misplaced a robe, and the cook is too old to be scolded. So, the blame trickles down, naturally, to the lowest branch. She's summoned to kneel before the mistress. The room smells of incense and dried citrus. The mistress doesn't raise her voice, but her tone could slice rice paper. If one servant fails, all fail, she says, without blinking. Are you not part of the household? You are, in the way a bucket is part of a, well, necessary, but replaceable. you retreat. The girl returns to the storeroom and folds towels with unnecessary force. You notice her blink rapidly, once, twice, but the tears don't fall. They never do in front of others. One of the older girls passes by and offers her a scrap of dried plum. Not quite affection, more like battlefield solidarity. Here's a strange detail. Some noble households rank their servants within the servant class, using animal metaphors. A crane girl served tea. A fox girl handled laundry. A dog girl cleaned chamber pots. Not officially, of course, but behind closed doors, these nicknames stuck. You can guess which ones came with more respect. Despite all this, the girl keeps going. After all, there's pride in being invisible. Well, you become an expert at reading the unspoken. You know that when the Lord clears his throat 3 times during dinner, he's displeased with the temperature of the psyche. You know that when the mistress adjusts her sleeves during poetry reading, she's signaling boredom. You know when to duck, when to kneel, when to vanish. Even among the servants, the hierarchy is brutal. The senior kitchen girl once tripped over a younger one and blamed her for standing too still. No one argued. The punishment: cleaning out the winter rat traps. With bare hands, the most absurd part. Promotions are possible, but only in theory. You could rise to headmaid if the stars align. But that depends on someone else failing dramatically, or dying quietly. Until then, you stay in your lane, bow at the right times, and try not to cough during prayer. But amid all this structure, there's strategy. The girl learns how to curry favor, remembering who likes sweet plums, who hates creased sleeves, who fears frogs. Little tricks, little alliances. Enough to make the day smoother if not easier. One whispered conversation in the laundry room hints at a bigger truth. Some girls play the long game. Win the favor of a visiting merchant, maybe get a gift. Smile at the right samurai's nephew, maybe be noticed. It's not romantic. It's not a dream. It's survival, with a dash of calculated hope. The girl doesn't dare hope yet, but she watches. The senior maid glide through the halls, carrying herself with quiet power. There's respect there. She sees that. She wants that still. Nothing comes easy. That evening, a teacup shatters in accident. Truly. The girl who dropped it is only 9. The mistress doesn't yell. She simply says, "No dinner tonight," and walks away. Later, you find that same girl eating a stolen rice ball behind the stables, eyes darting like a feral cat. You almost smile, almost dot, and yet, through all this, the system holds. No one rebels, not loudly, not yet. Historians debate whether these rigid hierarchies made Japanese noble households more efficient or simply more fearful. Was it order, or was it collective exhaustion dressed up as elegance? As the lanterns flicker again and the house quiets for the night, you return to your corner. The floor creaks under your mat. You hear someone sniffling nearby, muffled by a sleeve. You close your eyes, already bracing for tomorrow's unspoken challenge. A world where everything must look perfect on the surface, no matter how much it hurts underneath. You're roused not by sound, but by scent. The sharp tang of vinegar-soaked rags, the smoky waft of damp kindling that just won't light. You stretch, already aching, and feel the chill of dawn creep under your sleeves. The girl next to you, rubbing sleep from her eyes, is already fumbling for her sandals. The day waits for no one, not even the UN DARF. Today, you're walking through the rhythm of a servant girl's daily grind, the kind of schedule that doesn't exist in our blocks, but in endless cycles of cleaning, fetching, serving, and not being yelled at. If you've ever complained about a long shift, this will recalibrate your definition of long. She begins with fire, or tries to. You crouch beside her at the stone hearth, where she carefully arranges wood that's been too damp since last month's. Rain, 1 flick of flint, 2, 3, and nothing but smoke. She coughs. You do too, but she keeps going. Because breakfast for 20 doesn't make itself. By the time the rice is simmering and the pickled radish is plated, she's already behind schedule. The household runs like a temple, quiet on the surface, with invisible panic churning underneath. A guest is expected today. The Lord's cousin, a man who once claimed to have hunted a tanuki with a hand fan. No one believes him, but everyone pretends. You shadow the girl as she scrubs the wooden veranda. It's not just about getting it clean. It has to look freshly cleaned. There's a difference. Smudged streaks imply laziness. Too much shine implies showing off. So she crouches and polishes with damp cloth and ash paste until the wood glows. Just enough. Historians still debate the exact origins of these perfectionist cleaning rituals. Some say it dates back to Buddhist temple customs, where purity of surroundings reflected purity of spirit. Others say it's just another way to keep servants busy enough to avoid thinking. From there, it's on to the garden paths clearing. Stray petals, adjusting stone lanterns, brushing dirt and decorative swirls that you know will be ruined the moment someone walks by. But aesthetics matter here, especially the kind that say, this household is under control, even when it isn't. You move to the laundry basin next. The girl dunks kimono after kimono into cold water and scrubs each collar like it personally insulted her. She uses a paddle made of wood so worn it's practically a relic, and her knuckles turn red from the cold. You're not sure what's worse, the ache in her hands or the knowledge that these clothes belong to people who will never thank her. There's a short break for food, if you can call it that. A bowl of barley porridge with a few floating greens. She eats quickly, glancing over her shoulder every few bites in case someone calls her name. She's mastered the art of eating like it's a crime, quietly, quickly, and with total awareness that it could be taken away. One odd detail you notice, every meal, she saves 1 grain of rice on the edge of her bowl. Later, she flicks it outside, for the sparrows. Not superstition, just a gesture of solidarity. After all, she knows what it's like to scavenge. The afternoon brings dress prep. You assist her as she helps the mistress change into ceremonial robes. It's a delicate ballet of fabrics, one layer of silk, then another, each fold precisely measured. Each tie snug, but never tight. You're not dressing a person, you're dressing a mood. The mistress doesn't speak during the process. She simply holds out her arms and expects everything to be understood. The girl moves with muscle memory, gently adjusting sleeves, tucking sashes, smoothing wrinkles with the heel of her hand. A single misaligned hem could ruin the entire image. Or worse, delay the mistress's entrance by 5 seconds. That's punishable by silence for a week. In this world, silence is both punishment and reward. Too much of it, and you're forgotten. Too little, and you've said something you shouldn't. It's like walking a tightrope between obedience and disappearance. Once the dressing is done, the girl runs errands, fetching incense, polishing lacquered trays, fetching the Lord's scrolls, carrying messages to the steward's wife, who pretends not to remember her name. There's a strange moment when she passes the mirror stand in the hall. She glances at her reflection, brief, accidental. She doesn't linger, but in that fleeting look, you see someone who remembers there's more to her than calloused hands and obedience. Someone almost rebellious. But the moment passes. Someone calls. She answers. Historians often describe servant girls as background players in the great theater of Japanese nobility. But here's the truth. Without them, the play wouldn't happen at all. The actors wouldn't be dressed. The stage wouldn't be swept. The food wouldn't arrive on time. The ink wouldn't flow. And yet when you look at old records, these girls are barely mentioned. Names erased. Duties assumed. It's like being indispensable and invisible at the same time. That evening, she prepares the baths. The fire under the cauldron spits and roars. She stirs the water with a bamboo rod taller than she is. Then she pours bucket after bucket into the cedar tub and tests the temperature with her wrist, wincing as the steam hits her skin. You catch her humming under her breath a tune you've never heard. Maybe her mother's voice lingers in that melody, or maybe it's just something she made up to survive. By the time her work is done, the moon is already high. The mistress is asleep. The hallways are quiet, and she still has to clean the ink brushes and sweep the steps again. One quirky fact before you sleep. Some servant girls used to tuck small pebbles into the hems of their sleeves. Not for defense, not for luck, but to feel something of their own. A private, tactile reminder that part of them wasn't owned. And that more than the bowing, the silence, the endless folding, That's what gets you. The quiet little acts of personhood in a life designed to erase it. You curl up beside her on the straw mat, listening to her breath steady into sleep. Tomorrow will be the same. But for now, there's a sliver of peace in the quiet. In the fact that somehow, she's still here. You wake to the muffled sound of cloth swishing over polished wood. No footsteps, just the measured rustle of a kimono hem, a whisper against the floor. The girl is already kneeling in the outer room, waiting for her mistress to speak, and she's not alone. You realize today is different. Today it's personal. Every household has a core, and in this one, it's not the master or the steward. It's the mistress, the woman in charge of taste, temper, and terrifyingly vague expectations. She doesn't shout. She doesn't stomp. She doesn't need to. Her power lies in subtle gestures. A lifted eyebrow, a long pause, a cup of tea, pushed half an inch to the left, and the servant girl. She's been learning to read these signs with the urgency of someone reading fire codes in a burning building. Today, the mistress is in a mood. You can tell because her silk sleeve doesn't quite flutter when she moves. She snaps it instead. Her tea is cold. Her poem scrolls are misaligned. Her hairpin is too tight. Naturally, none of this is her fault. So someone guess who must be at fault instead. You kneel with the girl as she receives her orders for the day. Polish the brass mirror. Restitch the sleeping screen. Find the matching incense that smells like pine and not sandalwood, even though the last pine incense stick was burned 3 weeks ago. And above all, do it quietly. Historians still argue whether noble women in ancient Japan held real domestic power or simply performed the illusion of it. But inside this house, there's no illusion. The mistress rules this domain like a playwright. With a cast that never gets to see the script, she decides what's beautiful, what's dignified, what's appropriate, and what's disappointing. That cruel catch-all word that lands heavier than any slap. The girl doesn't flinch when she's scolded for something she didn't do again. A decorative comb is missing. The mistress can't find it. So, naturally, the girl must have moved it. Check under the dressing table. The mistress says, with a sigh so theatrical it should be embroidered. The comb isn't there. Of course it isn't. But she pretends to keep searching anyway, murmuring soft apologies like incense smoke useless, but expected, later. While wiping down the storage chest, the girl quietly places a fresh stick of the wrong incense in the tray. She doesn't have pine. No one does. But she figures if she lights it early enough, maybe the mistress will forget. It doesn't work. The scent rises delicate to floral. The mistress pauses during her poetry reading. This isn't right, she murmurs. Why is nothing right today? She doesn't raise her voice. She raises your blood pressure. The girl bows. Again. Always. There's something about this relationship, something uniquely strained. It's not maternal, not even formal. It's more like tending to a house cat with royal ambitions. One moment, affectionate, the next slicing your hand open over a misplaced blanket. Quirky historical aside, some mistresses used to give their favorite servant girls small gifts, hair ribbons, trinkets, sweets wrapped in silk. But these weren't acts of kindness, really. More like tiny investments in loyalty. Rewards that said, I see you, but only when you're useful. Our girl, she's never received a ribbon. Only a lopsided scolding last spring for smiling during New Year's tea. And yet, strangely, the mistress is the closest thing to a teacher the girl has. She learns more from the woman's moods than from any tutor. She learns poise, tact, how to listen to what isn't said. That's something no scroll can teach. In the afternoon, the mistress has guests, 3 noblewomen from another estate. They arrive in a swirl of perfumes and painted fans, their laughter as light as their lies. The girl serves tea on a lacquered tray, careful not to let the cups clink. She doesn't look up, but she hears everything. Oh, your servant girls are so delicate here, one of the women says. They barely seem to breathe. The mistress smiles faintly. They're well trained. One must know how to shape even clay. The girl doesn't respond, doesn't blink, just bows, hands steady, as she clears the tea. Historians still wonder. Whether girls like her internalized these judgments or merely endured them. Did they come to believe they were clay, to be shaped and discarded? Or did they carry secret versions of themselves beneath the surface, quiet, watchful, waiting? You catch her looking at a guest's jade comb for a second too long. Not greedily, not even wistfully, just curiously. Like she's trying to imagine what it would feel like to own something small and beautiful that wasn't given through obedience. After the guests leave, the mistress finally exhales. She stands, stretches her back, and says, "The peach tea was too sweet. Remind the cook." Then she turns to the girl, "And find the comb. I know you moved it." The girl bows again. But this time, you notice something new. She doesn't search for the comb, not really. She goes through the motions, but her eyes are elsewhere. She's moving slowly now, methodically, like she's saving her energy for something that matters. That night, after the house settles, and the lanterns burn low, you find her outside, near the back shed, rubbing the base of her thumb in small circles the spot where the tray bruised her earlier. She's humming again, the same tune as before, but softer now, almost defiant in its quiet. And just before she turns to go back in, she reaches into the dirt behind the shed and pulls out a little bundle, nothing more than a wrapped cloth inside. The missing comb, she hid it. You don't know why, not to steal it, not even to sabotage. Maybe just to prove she could. A small rebellion. A whisper of power in a world where she's supposed to have none. You tuck yourself beside her on the straw mat, heart still buzzing from the comb reveal. She's already asleep, one arm curled protectively around her chest. Tomorrow, she'll return the comb. Or maybe she won't. But tonight, she owns something. Even if it's just a secret. The clack of Gitta's sandals echoes faintly across the stone path as you wake, the sound bouncing between garden walls, like a distant heartbeat. Another day, another breathless scramble into your duties. But today feels different, not in what's happening around you, but in the glimpses of something deeper, stirring beneath the monotony. Today, you're going to learn the things no one talks about, the skills passed from one servant girl to another, in hushed tones behind drying screens. And cooking pots, not the official chores, not the posted duties. These are the hidden lessons. The art of pleasing without presuming, of navigating social cues, so faint they barely register. This is where survival turns into strategy. The morning begins, like always, water for the mistress, a tray of pickled daikon, a glance too long at a thread that's come loose from her sash. But while your hands pour and fold and arrange, your ears are tuned elsewhere. The senior girl whispers, "You'll need to know how to listen when you aren't meant to, so you do." It turns out a servant's real education doesn't happen in front of scrolls. It happens while kneeling outside rooms with thin paper walls. You absorb poetry you'll never recite, etiquette for dinners you'll never attend, and the layers of court politics that could collapse a household with a single wrong word. Historians still debate how much influence servant girls had through this kind of passive observation. Did they merely absorb culture, or did they become its quiet keepers? You start to suspect it's the latter. After all, who else remembers exactly which guest prefers lotus tea over plum? During your midday task folding ceremonial robes for the autumn festival, you're pulled aside by an older girl. She's been in the house so long, she's practically part of the architecture. She teaches you something seemingly simple. How to bow so your sleeve hides your face, just enough to mask emotion. Smile with your voice, not your mouth, she advises. The lady prefers that. It's more than just manners. It's camouflage. That afternoon, the mistress calls for music. Not to play, just to listen. She lies on her cushions, eyes closed, and a koto player strums gently nearby. You stand at the edge of the room, motionless, hands folded, and you realize you're being watched not by the lady, but by her guest. A visiting priest, maybe a poet. His gaze is not cruel, just curious, but even curiosity feels invasive. The older girl sees it too. Later, behind the laundry screens, she tells you, when men visit, you stand stiller. Speak lower, look down. But if they speak to you first, answer clear. You aren't a ghost, you're useful. That's your shield. And suddenly you understand what she means. In a world where servant girls can't say no, being useful becomes the only boundary you're allowed to draw. There's a legend you hear that night. As the younger girls curl around a flickering lamp, one whispers about a servant who became a concubine, then an advisor, then vanished into myth. She knew the pillow book by heart, they say. She could arrange hair like a priestess. The story is soft, slippery, half truth and half hope. One girl giggles. She probably just ran away with a stable boy. No, says another. She knew how to talk without saying things. That's why she survived. You learn more from that quiet campfire gossip than from all the lectures you've endured. How to pour sake without splashing. How to fold notes so the wax seals don't crack. How to carry messages between rooms without seeming like you overheard them. And here's something oddly specific. You learn how to cry, silently eyes damp, but face relaxed. It's a skill, one that earns sympathy from some, silence from others, and invisibility when you need it most. A fringe detail, barely known outside the servant quarters. There were training songs, lullabies disguised as mnemonics. One girl hums, and the lyrics sound sweet until you realize they're coded instructions. Bow when the bell rings. Fold when the drum sounds. Never eat the first plum from the tray. No one teaches these aloud. You absorb them through repetition, through tone, through muscle memory. There's a moment near sunset when you're asked to deliver a note. Nothing major, just a message from the mistress to the steward's wife. You take it, slip through the corridors, and pause briefly outside a screen where voices murmur. You shouldn't listen, but you do. The steward is arguing softly with a guest, something about debts, rice owed, scribes bribed. You tuck that information somewhere deep in your mind, not because it concerns you directly, but because it might. Every secret in this house is a match. You don't want to be near the fire when someone strikes it, and then something rare happens. As you pass through the inner garden, the mistress stops you not to scold, not to command. She asks a question. Did you choose the incense this morning? You hesitate, not sure if it's a trap. Yes, you answer, voice low. She nods, non-committal. It was light, almost pleasant. That's it. She turns away. But your pulse drums in your ears like temple bells, almost pleasant. It's not praise, but it's not praise either. Later that night, you light your own incense scraps, saved from discarded sticks. You sit by the window, watching the wind tug at the lanterns outside. There's no firewood left in the hearth. Your mat is thin, but the smoke rises just the same. Historians often describe these girls as laborers, lost in lists of chores and duties. But you now know the truth. They were listeners, interpreters, diplomats in cotton robes. And in the quiet, candle-flickering hours of night, you begin to feel it. Not power, exactly, but the first tiny warmth of competence, of knowing a world, so intimately that no one even sees your footsteps in it anymore. You exhale, slow and steady, a learned breath, the kind that keeps you still when everything else demands motion. Tomorrow, the mistress will scowl, the tray will wobble, the boy in the garden will glance at you twice, and you will bow, smile, and endure. Because now you know the rules beneath the rules. Dawn creeps in without fanfare, the light too pale and the air too damp. You open your eyes to the same low beams, the same dusty paper walls, but something has shifted. Not outside-inside. Today, the girl is older. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but enough to notice. Her limbs have lengthened, her voice has softened in pitch, and the glances she receives from the older male servants linger half a breath longer than before. You don't like it. Neither does she. But she notices. With age comes new duties, some named, some not. She's trusted now with preparing the mistress's cosmetics. Not mixing them, heaven forbid, but presenting the lacquered boxes in the right order, opening the tiny compartments, knowing which brush to hand over and when to avert her gaze. She watches the mistress paint her face like a porcelain doll. Lid-white skin, charcoal black teeth, vermilion lips, drawn like a secret. Today's task is the forehead, a faint blue line, It's supposed to evoke elegance, but up close, it just looks like effort. The girl tries not to stare, but her mind races. How many mornings has she spent making someone else beautiful? How many mornings will she spend invisible? Historians still argue whether these cosmetic rituals were primarily for status display, or if they evolved from religious purification rites, maybe both. All you know is that they require hours of your life and the steadiness of a surgeon. While you're wiping the table, a mirror catches your eye. For a second, you see the girl's reflection, her real face, not the quiet, practiced mask she wears. You notice a small pimple on her chin. She notices it too. She touches it absently, and then quickly pulls her hand away. Vanity is not for girls like her. Vanity implies entitlement. Later that morning, a messenger arrives from a neighboring estate. There's going to be a poetry gathering, an elegant excuse for rival households to flaunt their literary children and expensive robes. The mistress is invited, which means chaos. The girl is assigned to inventory the poetry scrolls. She climbs the high shelves, careful not to crease the paper, murmuring the poem titles under her breath like a prayer. But when she stumbles across a love poem written by the master, one clearly not meant for his wife, she hesitates. It's addressed to someone called Mist of the Pines. You and the girl both blink. That's not anyone in this household. You quickly roll it up again. Not your business. Not your disaster. But you've tucked that name away now. In this house, names are never just names. During lunch, you're sent to deliver a meal to the boy who tends the garden, the same one who's been stealing glances. He's close to your age, maybe a bit older. You pass the tray silently, but he grins. You walk like a cloud, he says. You freeze. Compliments are rare, dangerous even. But his tone isn't mocking, just noticing. You say nothing. But later, while washing the dishes, you realize you were humming again. Something soft and silly. It feels like betrayal. Of what? You're not sure. Quirky detail. Girls in your position sometimes practiced their smiles in water basins. Not for flirtation, but to get it right. A crooked smile could be mistaken for mockery. A too wide one for arrogance. You catch yourself doing it that night. Just once, in the late afternoon, the mistress decides her wardrobe needs sorting. She doesn't do it herself, of course. That's your job. You air out robes that haven't been touched since last summer, checking for silverfish and old perfume ciseus. One of them smells faintly like sea salt. It makes you pause. The mistress has never been to the sea, and suddenly, you realize something. Wild, neither have you. You've never left this estate, not even for errands. You've been here so long, the floorboards know your footsteps. The garden gate may as well be a wall. The only water you've seen bigger than a washtub is the small pond near the kitchen, with its tired koi and mossy stones. You ask one of the older girls, quietly, if she's ever seen the ocean. Once she says, when I was sold here. You don't ask again. Historians often describe this period of a servant girl's life as her most useful years. Her body is strong. Her memory is sharp. She's obedient, adaptable, not yet rebellious. A prime worker, a model of restraint. But what they forget to mention is this. It's also the most watched time in her life. Eyes are on her from every direction, some measuring her worth, others measuring something else entirely. That evening, while folding robes, the girl finds something hidden in the sleeve of a kimono, a slip of paper, a poem, handwritten. But not the master's script, and definitely not the mistress's. It's clumsy, sweet, and short. A haiku about plum blossoms. It's unsigned. Her hands tremble, just slightly. You recognize the handwriting, the garden boy. She tucks it away, says nothing, but you see her. Lips press into a line so thin it could slice silk. Later, when she washes her hands, she scrubs longer than usual, maybe to calm herself, maybe to wash away something she's not sure she's allowed to feel. In the distance, the mistress laughs at something the steward said. The house buzzes with preparation for tomorrow's poetry gathering. You fade into the background again, watching the shadows on the wall. watching the girl fold and bow and blend. But tonight, something's shifted. There's a spark in her now. Not rebellion, not yet. Just awareness of herself, of her body, of the eyes that watch and the ones that don't. She curls up on her mat, clutching the corner of her sleeve a little tighter. You lie beside her, in the hush of the corridor, listening to the wind brush against the paper windows. The poem is hidden, in her sash. Not because she plans to respond, not yet, but because for once, someone saw her not as an object or a function, but as a person. You awaken to rain, not a storm, just a soft, persistent drizzle, tapping against the paper windows, like an impatient visitor. The kind of rain that soaks into everything, from straw sandals to woven sleeves, leaving behind a cold that sticks in your bones. The girl is already up, wrapping her shawl tighter, because rain doesn't cancel chores. If anything, it multiplies them. Today, the world shrinks. No garden to sweep, no sun to dry linens, no breeze to carry away smoke from the stove. Everything smells of damp wood and boiled barley. You watch the girl adjust her rhythm, pivoting. Without complaint, this is the art of the servant. Flexibility, invisible and absolute. Inside the house, the floorboards are slick. The master has stayed home instead of leaving for his usual temple visit, which means tension in the air. Everyone walks lighter, speaks softer, avoids eye contact. The girl has already burned her fingers on the brazier once. She doesn't yelp, just dips them in the water bucket and keeps going. She's sent to clean the instone. It's a delicate task, kink is expensive, and the stones are carved with faint brushwork from ancestors no one remembers. You must scrub without scraping, rinse without soaking, dry without leaving lint. It's the kind of labor that looks simple until you do it. And while she works, the mistress reads. Not aloud, of course, but her lips move slightly as she reads. A letter from her cousin. Her expression stays smooth, but the girl notices a faint twitch at the edge of her brow. Something's wrong. You see it too. The scroll is folded back too quickly. The mistress doesn't finish her tea. That always means something. Historians still debate how much noblewomen controlled household correspondence, especially in times of political change. Some claim they merely transcribed what men dictated. Others believe women carried entire networks of gossip and negotiation behind their silk fans and polite nods. Judging by the sudden way the mistress snaps for her steward, you suspect that the girl hears the order. Prepare my traveling robe. That's not part of the daily schedule. It's not even part of the monthly one. Something is shifting. She retrieves the robe from the cedar chesta, deep indigo one with embroidered chrysanthemums, and begins brushing the fabric gently with a lacquered comb. She runs her fingers over the hem, still damp from last year's rain, or freshly cleaned and never worn. Down the hall, you hear the master pacing. He never paces. The girl catches your eye not directly, but in that subtle way girls do when they sense trouble gathering like clouds behind closed doors. She's sent next to clean the lanterns. Rain has dripped into a few of them, dousing the wicks. It's tedious, cold work replacing oil, trimming burnt paper, but the mistress wants the house to glow with restraint. Whatever that means, you're not allowed to ask. One quirky tradition comes to mind. Some households during this era believed that rainy days made spirits more active, especially ancestral ones. So lanterns were kept burning, not just for light, but to ward off unsettled presences. Whether or not you believe in ghosts, the girl moves faster when the wind howls. The afternoon drips by like the rain itself, slow, persistent, quietly intrusive. The girl is called to the master's study. That's rare. She bows at the door, enters only when called. You follow her, steps measured, rehearsed. Inside, the master doesn't look up. He gestures toward a scroll he's dropped. Straighten that. His voice is flat, brittle. She does, quickly. He watches her for a moment longer than necessary. You feel the pause in the air, too quiet, too focused. Where were you yesterday? He asks suddenly. She blinks with the kitchen, my lord. He doesn't respond, just waves her away. Later, in the kitchen, she's quiet, more than usual. She's replaying the moment in her head, over and over. You can tell. The gaze. The question. The way he tapped his fingers on the writing desk, like he was trying to remember something about her, not her name. But some detail he can't quite place. Historians argue whether servant girls had any protection from men in power. There were codes of coarse Confucian ideals, clan expectations, but when you're alone in a room with someone who decides your fate with a glance, codes are about as useful as wet parchment. The girl doesn't speak of it. She just works harder. That evening, she takes longer folding the sleeping mats. She smooths each corner, brushes away imaginary dust, arranges them with geometric precision. It's not about tidiness, it's about control. About having a single thing in her world she can make right later. Behind the kitchen shed, she pulls the haiku poem from her sash again. She reads it in the rain. It's damp now, edges curling like petals, but the ink is still legible. A silly little poem about plum blossoms and morning light, and for a moment, you feel it, that tiny flicker of joy. Not hope, not yet, just remembrance that something exists beyond orders and robes and silence. Then she burns it, not out of fear, out of decision. The paper curls, blackens, vanishes. In the brazier's hiss, she watches the ash scatter into the rain. Her shoulders rise, fall, no tears. She's not erasing the boy. She's erasing the possibility. Because when the air is this heavy, and the master starts to notice you by presence instead of absence, there's no room for daydreams. Later that night, she lies on her mat, fingers curled in her sleeves. You lie beside her, listening to the rain's final whispers on the roof tiles, and in the hush between droplets. You realize she's humming again. Not the same tune as before. Something lower, slower, more like armor than music. The rain has passed. You wake to a world rinsed clean. The scent of wet earth rising through the garden paths. The stones slick with dew, and the koi pond brimming just past its lip. It's a rare moment of freshness, of rebirth. But inside the house, nothing's changed. The girl moves through the morning like clockwork. And yet something in her rhythm has altered. She's quieter, but not dull. Slower, but not careless. You recognize it. She's conserving herself. Like a candle that's been trimmed too many times and still has to burn through the night. She prepares tea, folds robes, and avoids corners where the master might appear. Ever since that strange moment in his study, his footsteps have lingered longer than they should. You hear them in the hallway when he doesn't need to be there. You see the girl glance up before turning every corner. There's no open threat, just the possibility, and that's worse. Historians still argue whether noble households truly protected their young servant girls, or if their silence merely masked what everyone already knew. The official codes forbade misconduct. The actual practice, a delicate silence that devoured accountability. This morning, the mistress seems distracted. Her fan opens and closes at irregular intervals. Her gaze drifts too long toward the garden. When she calls the girl over, her words are sharp, but her heart isn't in it. Why did you leave the brazier uncovered last night? She snaps. The girl doesn't answer. She hadn't touched the brazier. But correcting the mistress is like trying to lecture a mountain. Pay attention, she adds coldly, dismissing her with a flick of the wrist. The day continues under this haze of tension. The girl is sent to assist with temple preparations. A priest is visiting. Offerings must be arranged. Paper lanterns prepared. You follow her into the storehouse, where she gathers the ritual items. Lotus-shaped incense holders, little bells, long scrolls that must be rolled so precisely they could pass through a silk sleeve without catching. You notice she hesitates over one item, a mask, plain white, used for a ceremonial dance. Not hers to wear, not hers to touch, really. But she lifts it, just briefly, and looks through the eye holes. The emptiness stares back. There's something about masks in this culture. They don't hide identity, they replace it. When the dancer puts it on, she becomes the role. Maybe the girl wonders what that would feel like, to be seen as someone else for a while. Later, during the priest's arrival, the household is eerily perfect. The mistress is composed. The master is reverent. The servants move like well-oiled gears. The girl helps lay out the offerings. You stand beside her as she lights the incense. The smoke rises slow, spiraling, beautiful. One of the steward's sons, barely older than the girl, whispers under his breath, "You look like a shrine maiden." It's not quite teasing, not quite praise, but it lingers. She says nothing, just moves the offering bowl half an inch to the left. Quirky detail time, during certain festivals. Servant girls were allowed to participate in performances, not as themselves, of course, but in masked roles. They'd dress as spirits, foxes, or mourners. No names, no identities, just masks and movements. It was the only time they could express emotion without consequence. That afternoon, the girl returns to her usual chores, mending, folding, sweeping. She finds a torn obi sash in the mistress's chamber, one with hand-stitched embroidery. Rather than discard it, she starts mending it with invisible stitches, so precise they disappear into the fabric. Not for praise. Not even because she's told. Just because doing something beautifully quietly has become her way of staying sane. Then, during the evening meal, something slips. The master's sake is warm, too warm. A misstep. The steward takes the blame, of course, but the master isn't interested in apologies. His eyes scan the room, then pause on the girl. Too long. The silence hangs like fog. The mistress clears her throat sharply. "More tea," she says, not looking at anyone. The girl rises, steps back, and disappears to the kitchen. You follow, pulse drumming in time with her footsteps. She fumbles with the tea caddy, pours the water a little too quickly, wipes the rim of the cup 3 times instead of 2. She's shaken, but she hides it well. That night, she sleeps in the laundry room, not from punishment, but from avoidance. She says it's to finish mending linens. No one questions her. No one checks. You curl beside her, under the drying ropes and the faint scent of soap and rice starch. A single candle flickers in a corner. The shadows stretch long and soft. She doesn't hum tonight, but she mouths the words of that old training song, lips barely moving. Fold with care, bow with grace, vanish like the dew. Historians rarely write about fear this way. Not the loud kind, with battles and fire and fleeing, but the quiet kind, the one that grows in corridors and behind screens. The kind that makes you breathe shallower, speak softer, think smaller, and yet she endures. That's the miracle, not defiance, not escape, just presence. She's still here, still folding, bowing, breathing. You watch her slip into sleep, shoulders curled like a leaf after rain. And in the hush of the laundry room, between the scent of damp linen and camellia soap, you begin to understand something. Sometimes, surviving is the rebellion. You wake to the sound of laughter, not hers. Not anyone she knows. Laughter from the guest, hall-sharp, male, self-satisfied. The kind that bubbles up, not from joy, but from having the power to laugh freely. A merchant has arrived. Wealthy, influential, deeply invested in this household's good opinion. And that means one thing. Performance. The girl slips into her morning like armor. Everything polished, pressed, prepared. There will be extra tea rounds, more floor sweeping, trays arranged with seasonal sweets in the exact pattern of falling leaves. You follow her through the halls as she checks every paper screen for tears, fluffs every cushion, every surface. Must tell a story of elegance. Historians still argue over the political influence of merchant families in late classical Japan. Officially, they ranked below the nobility, but unofficially, their money talked, loudly, and sometimes, their sons came looking for wives in places they had no right to look. Today, the mistress is nervous. She speaks more quickly than usual. Her hair has been restyled 3 times before breakfast. Her eyes linger too long on the girl's face as she brushes past her in the corridor. "Fix your posture," she murmurs. "Don't slouch." The girl bows, straightens, doesn't breathe. You sense it immediately. Something has been arranged. Not a matched, not officially, but a presentation. A subtle display. A suggestion, and the girl is part of it. Later that morning, she's sent to refill the merchant's tea alone. The corridor feels too long, the tray in her hands too light, her sleeves too bright. She knocks softly, enters when summoned. You follow her in. The room smells of incense and cedar. The merchant is older, fat with confidence, lounging beside the master and steward. He smiles when he sees her. But it's the kind of smile that doesn't stop at the mouth. It tries to own everything it touches. "Ah, here she is," he says, lightly, the girl who walks like mist. She places the tray. Eyes down, words practiced. "Please enjoy, honored guest." He lifts her chin with one knuckle. Not hard, not bruising, just wrong. "She's quiet," he remarks. The master chuckles, well trained. The steward says nothing. The girl doesn't flinch, but you feel her breath leave her body in a tiny gust, barely enough to move a candle flame. The merchant says, "A quiet one makes a fine bride." Historians often overlook these moments. They favor wars, treaties, dynasties, but history happens here too, in the span of a tea pour, in the space between an offered glance and a forced smile. Back in the kitchen, the girl doesn't speak. Her hands shake once as she wipes the cups, then steady again. It's not the touch that lingers, it's what it meant. That her silence has been mistaken for consent. That her obedience has been recast as charm. She overhears the conversation later. She doesn't mean to. She's in the linen hall, arranging extra bedding for the guests, when the mistress's voice cuts softly through the walls. If the offer is sincere, it would be foolish to refuse. Her background is suitable enough. Background, not her personality, not her dreams, just her use. The girl sits down just for a second, on the folded bedding, hands in her lap, spine stiff. You do too. Quirky fact: some noble households kept informal marriage ledgers, quiet lists of girls within their service who might one day be offered to allies, clients, or relatives, not formally adopted, not formally family, just conveniently placed. That evening, she's instructed to wear her cleanest robe. Not silk, don't be ridiculous, but one with minimal stains, mended carefully. Her hair is brushed by the older girls. Light rice powder dabbed at her cheeks. Nothing extravagant, just presentable. She stares into the water basin afterward. Not admiring, just checking that she's still there. That her face hasn't changed into something she doesn't recognize. Dinner is ceremonial. The mistress hosts. The merchant reclines. The girl serves. Every motion is smooth. Every phrase is polished. Every word lands softly and goes nowhere, except one. When she places his third cup of tea, the merchant says, "Would you come to my estate, just a visit? No obligation." The room stills. The master pretends to laugh. The mistress says nothing. The girl bows. "I am honored, but I belong here." It's a quiet sentence, gentle, but inside it, you hear the ring of iron. Later, in the sleeping quarters, the older girls pretend not to look at her. One of them offers her half a plum. The gesture says, "You said no. That was dangerous. That was brave." Historians still debate whether servant girls could refuse these advances. The written rules say yes. The unwritten ones say, only if you're lucky. Tonight, the girl is lucky. Maybe because the mistress saw something she didn't want to lose. Maybe because the steward finally said no. Maybe just because the merchant found another distraction. It doesn't matter. She sleeps on her mat with her back straight, eyes wide for a while. You curl beside her. The air is heavy with incense and the tension of things that almost happened. You notice she's humming again, but this time, it's a different tune. Something ancient. Something she only sings when no one's listening. It sounds like survival. Morning comes without drama, no visitors, no sudden errands, no tea trays balanced like diplomatic offerings. Just the soft rattle of wind through the sliding doors, and the hum of chores settling into their usual rhythm. But after the last few days, this calm feels suspicious, like the air is holding its breath. The girl is sweeping leaves from the inner courtyard. They stick to the stones, wet and stubborn from yesterday's rain. She doesn't mind. Her body remembers this motion. Her hands grip the broom like an old friend. There's comfort in repetition, especially when everything else feels uncertain. The other servants chatter nearby about festival preparations. The Madadam gathering is close. You hear talk of hanging paper lanterns, crafting tiny boats from folded reeds, even cutting plum blossoms from colored paper to float in the pond. It sounds lovely. But the girl, she just sweeps. She hasn't mentioned the merchant again, nor the offer, nor the mistress's silence. But you can see it in her posture, that careful, steady stiffness, as if she's keeping herself upright with sheer will. Mid-morning brings a delivery. A crate of dried persimmons, some fabric bolts, and oddly books. Not scrolls, books, thick-bound volumes. The girl watches curiously as the master's steward unpacks them and carries them into the inner library. Later, she's sent to dust and arrange them. She's never touched books like these before, not the flimsy sort used to teach etiquette poems to children. These are serious. Some are Buddhist sutras. Others look like travel journals or legal commentaries. One has no title, just a faded golden swirl on the cover. She's not supposed to read, but she lingers. The room is quiet. The mistress is out, walking. The master is at prayer. She opens one. The script is small, precise. It describes the rituals of a mountain, shrine offerings, dances, purification rites. She traces the illustrations with her finger. Women in layered robes, arms raised, toward the moon. No one is watching. So she reads. Historians still argue whether female servants in noble households ever became literate. Some say it was forbidden. Others suggest the sharpest girls learned in secret by repetition, by watching, by piecing together words from discarded letters. You watch her do exactly that now. A breeze nudges the paper window. The lantern sways. She hides the book when footsteps approach. The rest of the day slips by in soft fragments. She polishes the mistress's lacquer combs. She helps the cook grind rice flour for sweets. She watches the steward whisper something to the master, too quietly, too long. There's a rumor among the older girls that a political visitor may arrive soon. Someone of importance. Someone with favors to distribute. Don't get noticed, one of them mutters, unless you know why. The girl makes herself small, not invisible, just blendable, like steam in a bathhouse. Present, but not tangible. Quirky tradition for the day. Some households had shadow calendars kept by the steward's wife or a trusted servant. These weren't the official scrolls with dates and moon cycles. They tracked something far more vital: who came, who spoke, who lingered. The girl begins to keep her own version of this, mentally. She notes who has been whispering, who has been absent, who has stopped drinking tea that night. She's sent to the master's room. It's a minor task refilling the oil in the reading lamp, but it's late. You follow close. He doesn't speak, just gestures. She replaces the oil silently, bows, but as she turns to leave, he says, "You're older than you used to be." It's not a compliment. It's not a threat. It's a note. She freezes briefly, but bows again. "Thank you, my lord." Then she's gone. Back in her own narrow room, she breathes. You breathe too. She lights a sliver of stolen incense sandalwood to strong and opens her palm. Inside, a pressed blossom. Paper from the books. She'd torn it out. A woman in ceremonial robes. A mask painted like the moon. She's not sure why she took it, but she stares at it now like it might explain her. Historians rarely write about inner lives. They catalog behavior, not thought. But here she is, a girl memorizing foot patterns from a ceremonial scroll she wasn't allowed to touch, holding onto paper as if it were armor. She tucks the drawing under her mat. No one saw, no one ever sees. She lies back, stares at the ceiling. The other girls whisper nearby about boys, about snacks, about festival gifts they'll never receive. She says nothing, but she hums again. It's a different tune, now half prayer, half rhythm. You lie beside her, listening to the night creak, and settle. And even though she hasn't left the estate in years, even though the only mountain she's climbed is metaphorically feel it, she's rising, not fast, not visibly, but she's climbing something, quietly, and she's not coming down. The lanterns are going up. You can smell the glue used to bind the rice paper, hear the soft thuds of bamboo frames being tested for sturdiness. and see the bright scraps of dyed cloth drifting across the courtyard like fallen petals. The autumn festival is almost here, and while the nobles think of poems and offerings, the servants think of logistics. Clean floors, straight lines, no accidents. The girl is everywhere. She's placing cushions and perfect arcs around the inner garden. She's fetching trays, helping the older girls grind sweet red bean paste, and fluffing silk drapes to disguise the peeling lattice in the guest room. Her fingers are sore, her sleeves dusted in powder, but her eyes are clear, focused. There's something different in her now. Not defiance, not yet, but presence. You feel it in the way she glances up when her name is called. Not hesitant, not timid, just ready. Historians still debate the purpose of these festivals inside the estates. Were they spiritual, social, or simply showmanship? Maybe all three. Either way, they were exhausting. Especially for the girls who set every lantern, poured every sake cup, and remained invisible the entire time. This morning, the mistress pulls the girl aside, not cruelly, just abruptly. "I'll need you to recite the offering verses tonight. Do you know them?" The girl bows. "Yes, my lady." She doesn't, not completely. But she will, later. She slips into the old linen storage room and kneels beside a discarded scroll case. She pulls out the tattered scroll with the ceremonial lines written in ink that has faded like morning mist. You crouch beside her, reading the verses silently as she murmurs them under her breath. By wind's soft hand, the flame endures. The moon bends low, her silence pure. The cadence is gentle, the words ritualistic. She practices until they don't feel like words anymore, just breath arranged in patterns. Outside, laughter bubbles up from the young footmen. Someone is practicing the biwa poorly. A plum wine bottle rolls down the hallway, chased by a boy too old to pretend it's an accident. The girl doesn't smile, but she doesn't frown either. Quirky fact, during autumn festivals, it was common for households to perform shadow plays, short, moralistic stories told using puppets or silhouettes. Sometimes, the servants performed them late at night, after the nobles had gone to bed, using leftover materials and making up their own versions of the tales. You see the girl helping rig a simple curtain that afternoon, tying string through a frame for one such play. The others are giggling. One boy waves a paper cutout of a demon. She picks up the figure of a fox, made in beautiful, tragic, clever. Her fingers pause on its face. Later in the kitchen, she cuts lantern paper into smaller pieces, not for the nobles, but for the servants' own tiny ceremony after midnight. One of the older girls tells her, "Make a wish when you float yours. Doesn't matter if it's foolish, we all do." The girl smiles, a real one. Faint, quick, like sunlight. Through a crack in the roof, evening descends. The house glows in warm amber. The guests arrive, some richly robed, others wrapped in stiff formality. The mistress is radiant in a layered red and white ensemble. The master wears his ceremonial hat as if it gives him gravity. The girl kneels by the altar, hands steady. The offering tray is simple: rice, fruit, incense. Her voice rises clearly as she recites the verses. Not too loud, not too soft. The perfect servant's volume. By wind's soft hand, the flame endures. The guests nod approvingly. A few don't even notice, but the mistress does. You catch the faintest curl at the edge of her lips. Maybe that's praise. Maybe it's relief. Afterward, as the noble guests compose impromptu poems, the servants are allowed to drift away quietly to the back courtyard, where the real celebration begins. The girl lights her lantern. It's smaller than the others, made from leftover rice paper and held together with borrowed wax. She places it on the pond's edge, waits for the ripple to settle, and lets it go. It drifts. She watches. No one speaks for a moment. Then someone starts humming that old servant song, the one about folding and bowing and vanishing. But now, it sounds almost proud. Historians rarely mention these servant celebrations. They weren't recorded, they weren't official, but they mattered. They were the moments when the invisible ones became real, if only for an hour. The The girl doesn't make a wish aloud, but you can feel it. Not for escape, not even for love, just for continuance. To keep going, to remain herself. As the lantern floats across the pond, she sits on the stone edge and rests her chin on her hands. For once, she isn't moving, isn't serving, just is. You lie beside her. The breeze cools. The candles flicker. The stars peek through, and the girl, for this one night, is not a servant. She is a story, a flicker of light, a verse in her own right. The lanterns are gone by morning. Some sank, some blew into reeds. A few were plucked out early by servants who needed their bamboo frames for firewood. But their glow lingers in memory, the way all fleeting things do. You and the girl rise early, not because anyone told her to, but because celebrations always leave messes. She sweeps the scattered husks of chestnut shells, straightens the cushions someone leaned on too heavily, and bundles the leftover sweets to be reused for tomorrow's tea trays. The quiet is back. But it's not pice, it's a reset. The mistress is quiet too. She stays behind her screen longer than usual. Something's changed in her, though you can't say what. Her instructions are vague. She says, prepare the second comb, without saying for what. She says, ready the blue robe, without saying who will wear it. By mid-morning, you hear the carriage arrive. A visitor, not one of the regular merchants or relatives. This one is official. You hear the servants whispering the name and envoy. Someone from the capital. The girl feels the tension before she sees it. She's instructed to bring a tray of warm sake to the guest room. Her hands tremble once, then go still. Then she moves. You follow. The guest is quiet, young, but with the calm of someone who's spent years learning to speak only when it benefits them. His robes are dark, his gestures precise. He thanks the girl softly when she serves him. The master watches too closely. So does the mistress. Everyone's waiting for something to happen, but nothing does. Not yet. She's dismissed quickly. Back to the kitchen. She scrubs the same spot. On the floor 3 times. Breathes slowly. Says nothing. Historians still argue whether these envoys held power over individual households, or merely represented greater political changes. But in places like this, presence alone was power. The girl knows it. You know it. And now, so does everyone else. That night, the mistress calls the girl to her room. Offers her tea. Not orders - offers. It's strange. They sit in silence. Then, the mistress says, "You've grown." The girl bows. "You've done well here." Another bow. And then, "Would you consider learning the scroll codes?" The girl looks up slowly. This is unexpected. The scroll codes are used to track estate inventories, staff assignments, deliveries, official things. Only senior servants touch them. To be asked is not kindness. It's elevation. You watch her say the only thing she can. "If it pleases my lady." And just like that, a shift. The next few days pass in odd rhythm. The girl is pulled from kitchen chores and sent to the inner room where scrolls are kept. The steward's wife begins teaching her the symbols marks for wool, grain, paper, lacquer, candles. She learns quickly, too quickly. You see the frown of suspicion on the steward's wife the first time the girl finishes a tally before being prompted. But nothing is said, not yet. Quirky tradition. Scroll keepers often added private annotations, coded lines, little poems or symbols to indicate which records were falsified, which were adjusted for presentation. These weren't taught, they were inherited. The girl finds one such mark in the margins of a rice log, a butterfly drawn with a single stroke. She says nothing, but she remembers. Outside the study, her body still belongs to chores. She helps pack winter clothes into cedar-lined chests. She brushes the soot from the altar figures. She pulls weeds from the pond's edge. But her mind is elsewhere, now shelved with scrolls, ink stains, and whispered numbers. One afternoon, the envoy returns. This time, the girl is not summoned, but she is mentioned. You hear it through the screen, through careful phrases. "She's been here how long?" he asks. 7 years, says the mistress. "That's long. She's capable." A pause, and then, from the envoy, "You could send her." It would reflect well. Send her. Where to whom? You feel the girl freeze from across the house. Historians sometimes note that the most talented servant girls were offered to allied households, as gifts, as tutors, as symbols of elegance. Not just because they were useful, but because they were proof that a household could cultivate refinement. That evening, the girl waits until the hall is empty. Then she slips into the scroll room. You follow. She unrolls the inventory list. Her name isn't on it, but next to a supply line, in parchment, charcoal, there's a mark she's never seen before. A symbol, one circle, one slash. She doesn't know what it means, but she knows what it feels like. The next morning, the mistress tells her, "We may send you to the central house next month. Just for a season. A season, for moons, 1,000 hours." The girl bows. "Yes, my lady." But later, as she washes the teacups, you see her hands tremble again. Not with fear, with anger. She doesn't want to go. Not like this. Not as a symbol. That night, the older girls talk about her in hushed voices. "She's lucky," one says. "They only send the best." "She's going to live in silk," says another. The girl says nothing. She sits by the fire, not smiling, not weeping, just burning quietly. You sit beside her. You've never felt her more alive. The weather has turned, morning frost glistens on the garden stones, and the air smells like cedar smoke and cold iron. The girl pulls her sleeves tighter as she steps outside, her breath visible in small clouds. It's the kind of chill that clings to the bones, that whispers of change long before it arrives. The house feels different now, quieter, like it's watching itself. The mistress has stopped giving small corrections. The steward's wife has grown strangely polite. Even the cook has started leaving out an extra portion at breakfast, saying nothing. You know what they're doing? They're preparing for her to go. The girl knows it too. She doesn't say much. Just works a little faster, walks a little straighter, memorizes a few more verses while she folds laundry. It's not joy. It's not dread. It's the feeling of being moved, like a piece on a board, selected, polished, and pointed toward another square. Historians still debate how common these transfers were, whether servant girls really had opportunities, or whether they were simply reshuffled to show off their household's elegance. What's clear is that once a girl was chosen, she rarely returned. This morning, she's given a robe. Not a fine one, not silk, but finer than she's used to. Pale, lavender, with a single stitched chrysanthemum at the collar, a symbol of autumn's end. She doesn't try it on, just runs her fingers across the threads. Later, the mistress summons her, offers her tea again. This time, they talk. "You'll represent us," the mistress says quietly. "Your posture, your voice, those will reflect on our name. Do you understand?" The girl nods. "Yes, my lady. You must be gracious, but not soft." A pause. Beautiful, but not inviting. Another pause, and always watch your silence. The girl bows. You can feel her absorbing the words like ink into cloth, not because she agrees, but because she has to. She's told she'd leave in 6 days, enough time to prepare her box of belongings, which isn't much. A comb, a poem fragment, 2 extra sleeves, a dried blossom pressed between rice paper. She wraps them carefully in linen. No one offers to help. This is her task alone. Quirky. Tradition. Girls departing for other households were sometimes given a good luck fan, a folding fan with an ink-drawn proverb, written by the lady of the house. The mistress gives the girl one on her 3rd day of preparation. A single phrase inked across the ribs. "Bend, and you will not break." The girl bows as she receives it, but inside you hear her whisper, "I didn't break anyway." That afternoon, she's sent to offer incense at the garden altar. It's supposed to be for luck, or gratitude, or remembrance. She kneels, lights the coil, but she doesn't pray. She watches the smoke curl upward, watches it bend, twist, vanish. Then she stands. You see her slip into the linen room that night alone. She's not packing. She's not hiding. She's sewing. She's mending a sleeve, one she plans to leave behind. The stitches are small, careful, invisible. You wonder why she bothers. Then you realize it's a gift for the next girl. The one who will sleep on this mat. Who will be told to bow with grace and vanish like dew. The girl who hasn't arrived yet, but who will. Eventually, historians rarely talk about this legacy. The small kindnesses pass between invisible lives. But you see it now, in the stitches, the fold. The way she places the garment at the foot of the mat. The next morning, she's summoned again. This time to the scroll room. The steward's wife is there. You'll sign your mark, she says. Here, she points to a line. The girl hesitates. I don't have a mark, she says quietly. Make one, the woman replies. Now she dips the brush. She draws a spiral. Small, simple, whole. It isn't a name, it isn't a title, but it's hers. That night, she bathes alone. A rare privilege. You kneel nearby, listening to the water ripple against the wooden tub. She doesn't rush. She closes her eyes. She breathes. You can almost see her letting go. Not of the past, but of the expectation that she must be shaped by it when she dries her hair. She doesn't braid it into servant's cords. She lets it fall loose, just once. Just for tonight. You lie beside her on the mat one last time. The others are already asleep. The fire is low. The wind presses against the shutters like a question. She hums again, but now the melody has no sadness, just rhythm, purpose. It sounds like departure. It sounds like becoming. The morning she leaves is ordinary. No drums, no farewell procession. Just a straw-wheeled cart waiting in the courtyard, its wood still dark from last night's dew. One of the junior stewards fastens the clasp on her travel box. The mistress does not come to see her off. She has sent a letter instead, tied with pale blue ribbon and a servant's coin mostly symbolic. The master, predictably, does not appear. You follow her through the inner corridor as she takes her final walk across the estate. She doesn't look back. That's not her style. Instead, she checks her steps straight, even silent exactly, the way she was taught. A quiet perfection, the kind no one thanks her for. The other servant girls gather just out of sight. Not a formal goodbye. That wouldn't be proper. But one of them pretends to drop a rice cake near her path. Another glances up and hums that old training tune, off-key. Just loud enough to be heard. The girl says nothing. But you see it. Her hand curls ever so slightly. Just a twitch as if holding back a wave. Historians still debate how these transitions were understood by the girls themselves. Were they terrified? Honored? Resigned? It depends on the record and who wrote it. But no parchment ever captured the sound of a rice cake landing softly in dust, or the way a farewell could happen in complete silence. The cart is plain. Straw mat lining. A low roof. One driver hired for the day. She steps up without assistance. Her box sits neatly at her side. She doesn't wave. She doesn't need to, because this moment isn't about departure. It's about arrival. It's about claiming space in a world that never asked her name. You sit with her in the cart, the wooden wheels grumbling underfoot as the estate fades behind you. The fields stretch out in pale gold and silver. The road curves forward into a quiet unknown. She unties the blue ribbon from the letter. Doesn't open the letter. Just fingers the ribbon for a while, then tucks it into her sleeve. There's a mirror tucked into her box, a polished disc of brass, slightly warped. She pulls it out, studies her reflection for a moment. Not to admire, just to see it. It's a powerful thing. Knowing what you look like when no one is watching. Later, she eats the rice cake, slowly, thoughtfully. She doesn't smile. But she does hum. The sound carries over the road, over the fields, into the future, like a whisper wrapped in silk. You remember something back when she first arrived. She was small, hesitant. She bowed too deeply. She oversteeped the tea. She cried once, silently, when she dropped the master's ink brush. Now she holds herself like someone who belongs to no one, like someone who learned to braid her own name into the corners of scrolls no one thought she'd touch. Quirky tradition. In some regions, a departing servant girl would secretly leave behind a piece of herself, a comb, a thread, a flower pressed inside a wall crack, a charm, a quiet rebellion. a promise that she existed. The girl? She left the mended sleeve, the one stitched perfectly and folded 3 times. Someone will find it soon. Someone will wonder who cared enough to fix something so carefully. Someone might even wear it. But no one will know the name. Not unless she tells them, which she won't. Because now, the story is hers to unfold. As the cart crests a hill, she lifts her head. Wind stirs her sleeves. The sky spreads wide and pale, and the mountains in the distance rise like a promise. You close your eyes, and so does she. Together, you exhale. Not with grief, not with fear, but with that rarest of sounds, release. She is not safe, not yet, not always. But she is free, and that will have to be enough. The wheels grow quieter. The sky deepens from gray to soft indigo. The road ahead fades into gentle haze, like the boundary between dream and waking. You sit beside her, no longer watching the horizon, but listening to the sound of breath, to the quiet murmur of wind passing through late-season reeds. There is no more to do, no more to prove. The girl's hands rest in her lap, no longer clenched, no longer carrying trays, brushes, or scrolls. Her journey continues, but for tonight, she is simply still, and you, listener, are still too. You feel your own body slow, your thoughts drift like lanterns left afloat. The sharp lines of memory soften, the worries of your day lose their urgency. Even in the smallest stories, we find echoes of our own. The fear of being overlooked, the strength of survival, the quiet rebellion of holding on to yourself in a world that would rather you be silent tonight. You've walked alongside someone who was never meant to be remembered, but who remembered herself anyway. That's enough. That's everything. So, let your thoughts melt like ink in water. Let the images blur into one another, paper lanterns, stitched sleeves, smoke curling in cold air. Let your breath slow. Let your spine uncurl. You don't need to carry anything forward from here. Just rest. Just rest. Just rest.